Today I'd like to continue our journey through chapter 9 of the Gospel of Matthew. Take a look at verses 35 to 38, which really bring out, in a beautiful way, I think, the compassion of Jesus. In verse 35, it says, Jesus went around to all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and curing every disease and illness. It's interesting that the ministry of Jesus focuses really on his own people. And the references to synagogues here is not really a polemical reference. It just states exactly what Jesus intended to do, to go first to his own people, to encourage his own people, to encounter them. And he would do that most easily and readily through the synagogues. We also, of course, saw Jesus teaching on the mountainside, teaching in towns, teaching in different people's homes, teaching by the water. So really a multiplicity of places where Jesus encountered and Jesus used in his teaching ministry. But you notice that uh, he is teaching, but also as part of the teaching, there is a curing aspect. So it seems that Jesus makes this connection between preaching, telling people about the kingdom, but also very practical, very real, down to earth, specific actions of healing that Jesus engages in. Verse 36, it says, At the sight of the crowds, his heart was moved with pity for them because they were troubled and abandoned, like sheep without a shepherd. They were troubled. You really sense who Jesus is, I think, in this verse. You sense where his heart is, the deep affection he has for the people as he walks among them. It's really a verse about the heart. It's not about laying out the teaching. It's about the people and what their pain is, uh, what their struggles are, what they're going through. A very pastoral approach, which I think is really the right approach in ministry. It's not about the quality of our instruction sometimes, it's more about the quality of our heart and our ability to listen. And Jesus shows this here in a very beautiful way. Uh, that verse, that line that says, they were troubled, can be also translated in several other ways. A lot of these terms, a lot of these Greek terms can be translated in a multiple way in terms of English. Can be translated as harassed. And we know what it's like to be harassed and, just harassed by the everyday realities and challenges of life. They can certainly harass us, maybe harassed also by other people, by their comments, harassed by friends, neighbors, a lot of harassment going on. And then also another way it can be translated, this verb, troubled, harassed, but also bothered. Um, and really, that's a good term, I think, to describe the thousand petty persecutions and annoyances to which the poor are subjected. We see Jesus here ministering primarily to the poor. And Jesus seeing their struggles, seeing all of their attempts to just make a living, to feed their children, to clothe them, uh, all of those challenges that they face. And Jesus saw that, read that on their faces, and saw what they were going through and had compassion for them, related to them. Like a sheep without a shepherd. Uh, people of the land, people of the land. These were people who made a living off the land. Could be a reference to the contemptuous term used by the Pharisees to designate the poor and the ignorant who did not know the law well enough to observe it, uh, like a sheep without a shepherd. They just couldn't, spend all that time learning the law and learning all the subtleties of the law. They were just too busy trying to make a living and getting their lives together and providing for their families. And a lot of times we don't take this into consideration in ministry, right? That people are struggling and they just need a little kindness. And Jesus is showing that. And Jesus could see in them that there was a sense of this harassment, a sense of being bothered that was going on within them, and it was tough for them. Jesus could appreciate that, could appreciate their struggles, because remember, of course, Jesus himself had those same struggles in Nazareth with Mary and Joseph, the carpenter, the struggles. And of course, Jesus calling the fishermen, calling Matthew the tax collector, knew the struggles of people just to survive. And so he had this sense that they needed a shepherd. They needed somebody to help them. Uh, in John chapter 7, verses 47 to 49, it says, "So the Pharisees answered them, 'Have you been deceived? Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed in him? But the crowd which does not know the law is accursed.'" The Pharisees were thinking, well, a lot of people were following Jesus, but maybe these were people who were being deceived, or people who were ignorant, who didn't know the law. But what does the law come down to, really? Jesus always emphasizes this. It comes down to loving God, loving neighbor. And certainly these are people who are trying to love God. They're trying to love their neighbor. They're trying to give to other people. And they're struggling. And it's difficult. And it's a challenge. And Jesus appreciates that. And he doesn't want to add to their harassment. He doesn't want to add to their being bothered. He doesn't want to add to their troubles. He wants to take those away from them, give them compassion. Just like that shepherd who is guiding the sheep, who maybe gets lost or is confused or wanders off from the flock and needs a kindly shepherd to bring them back and to feed them, and to watch over them. Jesus is that shepherd, and he looks at the flock in that way. In Mark, as he tells the story, it's about those that are hungry that are coming, and Jesus has compassion on them and feeds them because they are hungry. In Matthew, it's interesting. It's really different. Matthew sees these people as spiritually unenlightened. There's a hunger maybe, but it's a hunger for a spiritual comfort. It's a hunger for a comforter. It's a hunger for somebody who will take those burdens of everyday life and transform them with compassion and kindness. And really, Jesus is saying this is what religion is all about. It's about offering this consolation to those that are having a difficult time and not making their life harder and more miserable and more difficult and laying more tasks on them. No, that's not what Jesus has come to do. And it's very interesting how the teaching element is always combined with the healing element. So Jesus sets out the teaching. He talks about the law and God and what we should do and moral teaching and all that, but always done in the context of how can I heal your heart? How can I bring you comfort? What are those things that have been upsetting you? How can I assist you with that? How can I listen to you and heal you of those hurts that you're experiencing? We see this in Numbers 27, verse 17, where it says, "Who shall act as their leader in all things to guide them in their actions? That the Lord's community may not be like sheep without a shepherd." Same phrase that Jesus used, we see in Numbers. In this passage, Moses is asking God to appoint a leader for the people upon his death. And God tells Moses to select Joshua as that leader. So it's very interesting that Jesus is sort of reflecting that passage that the people need a leader. They need someone to guide them. In 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 17, Micaiah the prophet says, I see all Israel scattered on the mountains, like sheep without a shepherd. And the Lord saying, these have no master. Let each of them go back home in peace. So they're like sheep without a shepherd, but what do they need? They need peace. They need that sense of contact with God. You can give them that peace and tell them they are good, they are loved, they are cared for. And that's what Jesus wants to communicate. Then in verse 37, Jesus says to his disciples, the harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. The harvest is out there, but we've got to go and reach out to the people and bring that consolation to them. And then in verse 38, so ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest. The master is God, but yet in the very next passage, Matthew 10, verses 1 through 15, it is Jesus who does the sending. So is Jesus implying that he is the master of the harvest, and he will send out the laborers? And so Jesus gives us the invitation to be one of those laborers, to go out there and to work on that harvest, and to do it in the same way Jesus did, with love and with compassion.